pocket when you see the new moon. Leave the door open to let the lightning out. Turn money in the pocket when you see the new moon. Leave the door open to let the lightning out. Turn money in the pocket when you see the new moon. Leave the door open to let the lightning out. Turn money in the pocket when you see the new moon. Leave the door open to let the lightning out. Turn money in the pocket when you see the new moon. Leave the door open to let the lightning out. Turn money in the pocket when you see the new moon. Leave the door open to let the lightning out. Witchcraft is seen by many writers as the historical survival of the very earliest form of religious practice. It is a remnant of the old Paleolithic fertility religion, whose rites and ceremonies still survive after perhaps 20 or even 30,000 years. It is a remarkable fact that as in its beginning and throughout its life, it has been and is still dominated by women. It is certainly true to say that in most, if not all, other religions, men have been the principal organisers and have occupied the key positions. The earliest types of human being have been called Eolithic or Dawn Man. As they slowly evolved from the animal world into that of thinking human beings and became individual, they became fearful, for individuality provokes fear and loneliness. This could be in some measure overcome by joining a group in an organised way. The round dance satisfied this need. The individual could join the dance and once more feel safe as a member of a group, all doing the same thing, trying, in fact, to rejoin the Eden he had left. The beginning of the round dance is naturally shrouded in mystery, but something of the sort does occur in the animal world. The hive of bees gives us a good illustration. It has been observed that if a field of clover was in bloom, perhaps 500 yards to the south of the hive, soon all the worker bees knew of this, and all went in that direction. Experiments were made which proved that certain individual bees who discovered the clover by mere chance, returning to the hive, could communicate this news, together with the directions, to the rest of the bees. Further observation showed that this was done by means of what is called the dance. In other groups of insects and animals, it has been shown that if a member of a group was isolated, though given the same food and conditions of living as it had been accustomed, it would not eat and would die unless returned to its group. This clearly illustrates the intensity of the communal bond in certain groups of animals. No doubt the first dance would be simply a spontaneous expression of joy, as the group reunited after being isolated from one another for a time, and this slowly developed into a regular and organised exercise. The women would certainly be the first to see the need for this, and as guardians of the home were the natural organisers. The dance, beginning as a spontaneous expression of emotions, was the very earliest organisation of man, that was not directly connected with the life of the community in a practical way. It was the beginning of religion, of superstition, and of magic. It was not essential to the animal world, but it was of great importance to the world of humans. The fear and loneliness which at times assailed man once he had acquired individuality could be cast aside when he joined the dance, and once more he could feel security as a member of the group. It was the woman who remained at home to care for the children, keep the fire going, and prepare the food. She was the giver of comfort. The continuation of the race was largely in her hands. With the large pot on the fire, she has symbolised food and warmth over a long period of time. When the men returned home, wearied by fighting or hunting, wounded perhaps, or on the point of collapse, they would be pleased enough to place themselves in the hands of their women, and willing enough to leave the organisation of home life to them. In this very early dawn time, it was the woman who was conscious of the fact that it was largely through her that the life of the race must continue. In all animal and plant life, the urge to create and to continue life is persistent, and at times all other activities are subordinate to this desire. Animals and plants never ask the reason for this. Man can and does, but he cannot give the answer. Neither can he answer the question as to what is the purpose of man and why is he here, though the Christian God does give such an answer. The women, as guardians of the home, organised the dance as a means of giving comfort to the members of the tribe. Later they modified it for another purpose, and this was for the reasons of fertility. Women noticed that the men could, at times, give their whole attention to hunting and fighting, and that when men's minds were fully concentrated on these activities, the women could be neglected. To remedy this, the dance was modified. How this was done in the very early times of the Stone Age people cannot be known, but in later times, right down to the end of the medieval period, drugs were used, the body was anointed with oils, and the dance was often done by people who only wore their birthday suits. The dance, at a later period, also became connected with the hunting and killing of animals, but by this time the men were taking some interest in its organisation. This dance was performed by men who wore the skins, heads and horns of the animals they intended to kill, and they mimicked the stalking and killing of these animals. The dance was also used to worship trees, water springs and wells. Also, huge outcrops of rock would be worshipped by dancing in a ring around it, or nearby. Yet a further use for this most useful of functions, the dance, the magic spell could be cast in it, but you cannot cast a spell in an unenclosed space. When men began to take an interest in the organisation of the dance and turned it into a hunting ceremony by wearing the head and horns of animals, they secured forever a principal part in the ceremony. The dancers always wore the type of horns and head of the animal who provided their principal food. One of the men, more outstanding than the rest, became the horned god, and thus began a religion, if it can be called a religion, which lasted for thousands of years, and the remnant of which we still have with us today and know as witchcraft. But though the god was personified by man, witchcraft has always been dominated by women. From this dance sprang the witch coven of 13, 12 witches and the horned god. The most effective number to perform the dance seems to be 13, a number that has always been associated with magic. The Knights of the Round Table, the 12 jurymen and judge, the cricket and football teams of 11 players, scorer and umpire are a few examples of its use, and the number could be repeated indefinitely in connection with groups or people who joined together for a purpose. One asks the question, why is this number so suitable? It is thought by some writers that the ancient had knowledge of electricity, and in witchcraft something of the sort is recognised. The character of man is positive and aggressive, that of the female negative or passive, and there can be no doubt of the attraction of one for the other. The sun is positive or male and the moon negative or female. There is some sort of attraction between the moon and the tides of the ocean, and it is said that the moon has some sort of effect on the mentality of people at certain times. If there is someone in the ring of 13 dancers who has the power to transmit suggestions, the setup for the pure is perfect, with hands all clasped tightly together. The mystic power passes round the ring and back to the leader. When Christianity swamped the early religions, the horned god necessarily became the devil. But long before the Christian religion appeared in the world as we know it, other well-organised religions had challenged this old organisation and had incorporated it in their systems. The old religion really belongs to the culture of the hunting people and not to that later period of time when land was cultivated and domestic animals kept. In Egypt it was joined with other religions and there reached its apex, for it was there under favourable climatic conditions that land was first cultivated. Settled conditions existed. There was no need to follow the herds of animals for food, as had been the custom before. It was in Egypt that the highest of the early cultures reached its peak. The priests of Egypt had the powers of hypnosis and telepathy. It is possible that this knowledge had been passed down from very remote times, for some writers think that Dawn Age man, in gaining powers of logic and reasoning, had lost that mysterious telephonic means of communication with his fellow beings that many animals seem to possess. It is equally fairly certain that the means of communication between people over long distances has never been completely lost, and it is possible that the old religions kept this secret. It would be a rash statement to say that this does not exist in the world today. The explanation of this is a baffling problem, of which there appears to be no reasonable explanation. Could it be a survival of the instinctive telepathy of the world? At this time, Egypt was the centre of the civilized world, and its religious ideas spread round the world, to China and also to Africa, where the old religion survived in its most complete form until modern times. In time, new gods from the north challenged those of Egypt. These were wind, sky, and rain gods. During the time of the Roman Empire, the gods were many and various, but the horned god could still be seen. Eventually, Christianity became the official religion for the empire, but there are many accounts of the activities of witches at this time in Italy. This is illustrated in the edict. If anyone at the calends of January goes about as a stag or bull, that is making himself into an animal and putting on the heads of beasts, he shall do penance for the year because it is devilistic. They divined and indulged in ecstatic practices, howled like dogs or wolves, and shouted nonsense rhymes, or tore a black lamb into pieces to summon the dead. Even more elaborate ceremonies took place. Men covered their bodies with goat skins, and as they danced, goats were sacrificed, while women were whipped with straps made of hides, masks were worn, images and round balls were hung in trees. Christianity first came to England during the time of the Roman Empire. It made little progress. When the Anglo-Saxon colonisation of England was complete, they embraced Christianity, but after the Danish invasions of the 9th century, the land returned to paganism. The horned god and witch cult carried on quite happily during this period, though they had plenty of other gods for company. However, with the conversion of the Danes to Christianity, and later when William of Normandy had conquered the country, Christianity became firmly established as far as the ruling class were concerned. With the village people it was quite a different story. They had their own customs and beliefs, which they had acquired over many thousands of years, and they probably carried on very much as before. During the 200 or 300 years after King William's conquest, no one of any importance took much interest in what these lowly peasants thought or did, as long as they performed the tasks set by their masters. Nominally, of course, they were Christians, and if told by their superiors to go to church, they went. They could neither read nor write, and what vicars, curates, or priests they had were, in a lot of cases, nearly as ignorant. Cases were reported of priests actively taking part in the ring dance with the witches. The leaders of the church became increasingly aware of this, but at first could do little. They knew that as far as many of the ordinary village people were concerned, paganism had never been extinguished. And they also knew that the church was not strong enough to do this. However, by the 14th century, the church leaders felt that they had now reached a position where they could deal a death blow at the old religion. The horned god, who had been in a similar position before, must have felt uneasy. The great prosecution of the witches began somewhere about this time, and increased in violence as time went on. What had been regarded as a pagan survival was to be seen now as direct antagonism to God by the devil. During the next 3 centuries, many thousands of people were tortured and burnt at the stake in England, and in Europe many millions. Witchcraft had to go underground, yet it still survived. The old customs were not easily killed off, and the oppressed peasant knew how to keep a secret. Unjust persecutions were no new thing to him. He had known thousands of years' oppression. At the witch trials, the tortured victims readily admitted to consorting with the horn god, or as he was now known, the devil. In painting, drawing and sculpture, the devil is always depicted as a horned figure with perhaps the head of a goat or a bull, complete with tail and cloven hoof. It is strange to reflect that the evil one should be shown in the guise of such useful domestic animals. Surely such animals are beneficial to mankind and could never have been selected as a deliberate act to represent the form of evil. One of the fiery coniferous creatures would have been more fitted for this post. The wolf, perhaps, most suitable. The horn god fell heir to this position by the force of circumstance. One feels that after ups and downs of 30,000 years, his attitude to the injustice must be rather philosophic.